Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. It's the 24th of September, 2020. You got 1 week left in the month of September. Wake me up when September ends. Update I missed yesterday, so I'm going to go over yesterday's Monday's update, and then Tuesday's. Oh, what day is it today? Thursday? Sorry, so Tuesday and Wednesday's updates. So the 22nd and then the 23rd of September, day 11 and day 12 of the Julian Assange hearing in his extradition case in the United Kingdom to go over to the United States. Yeah, it's a very big case. Journalism on trial. The truth hangs in the balance. Good morning, Quadrex, Loris. Let's just take a peek at what's going on the 22nd. Psychiatrist evaluated Julian Assange at a high risk of suicide if he is extradited. Dr. Michael Kopelman. And let me pull this up so you guys can look at him. He seems like a cool guy. Doesn't have the best teeth, but I'm sure he's a very smart gentleman. Speaking of that, I did dream last night that I had a gap tooth. So that's a little weird, but here we are. There is Mr. Kopelman, Emeritus Professor of Neuropsychiatry at the Institute of Psychiatry at King's College London. Took the stand, and then, again, this was on Tuesday, 22nd, to testify about his visits with Julian Assange in prison and his medical evaluations. Out of respect for Julian's privacy, not all details will be shared that were discussed in court, but the most relevant portions will be summarized here. Dr. Kopelman said that Assange, who has been diagnosed with clinical depression and Asperger's syndrome, would be at high risk of suicide if he were extradited to the United States. Dr. Kopelman observed in Julian a loss of sleep, a loss of weight, a sense of preoccupation and helplessness as a result of threats to his life, the concealment of a razor blade as a means to self-harm, and obsessive ruminations on ways of killing himself. I am as certain as a psychiatrist ever can be that, in the event of imminent extradition, Mr. Assange would indeed find a way to commit suicide, he wrote in written submissions to the court. In Section 91 of the United Kingdom's 2003 Extradition Act, it prohibits extradition if, quote, the physical or mental condition of the person is such that it would be unjust or oppressive to extradite him. Section 91 of the 2003 Extradition Act also prohibits extradition if, quote, the physical or mental condition of the person is such that it would be unjust or oppressive to extradite him. We all do hope that Julian will make it. Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights says that, quote, no one shall be subjected to torture or to inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. And Nils Melzer, remember we talked about Mr. Melzer before, he is a rapporteur for the UN on torture. He tweeted that, having investigated this case in my capacity as the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, I am absolutely convinced that if extradited to the USA, Assange will be exposed to an unfair trial and conditions of detention amounting to torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. And let's just see what Mr. Sir has to say, just to add a little flavor to our update today. Make sure I'm sharing audio.
Nils Melzer. I'm the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture. I have visited Julian Assange on the 9th of May 2019 in Belgium prison. I have evaluated the situation and
I'm not hearing anything on this one.
I'm absolutely convinced that if extradited to the United States, he will be exposed to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment.
Can you guys hear that? I can't hear anything.
I am convinced that the conditions of detention he will be exposed to there and the unfair trial he will be exposed to
both
are incompatible with human rights law and
91
do not allow his extradition to the United States.
And Article 3 were cited in Lori Love's case, in which the High Court ruled against extraditing Love, a UK-based computer science student who also has Asperger's syndrome, to the United States over alleged computer crimes. That court ruled in Love's favor on 2 grounds. The forum bar, meaning the United States instead of the United Kingdom was the wrong venue in which to try him, and the conditions he would face in a U.S. prison. We come to the conclusion that Mr. Love's, it's a man, Lori Love is a man, that Mr. Love's extradition would be oppressive by reason of his physical and mental condition. The court specifically cited the lack of adequate mental health care in the U.S. prison system. This is true. Suicide watch is not a form of treatment. It's not even a form of suicide watch. Right, Jeff? There's no evidence that treatment would or could be made available on suicide watch for the very conditions which suicide watch itself exacerbates. Britain doesn't extradite to any country that carries a death penalty for accused crime. The U.S. recently approved capital punishment. Thank you for that input there, Deborah Johnson. And I want to give a shout out to Miss Deborah Johnson, the lovely fellow Midwesterner, for becoming one of my Patreons, I think 2 days ago. So thank you to Miss Johnson for that. I'm going to put a banner on the bottom. Actually, I don't think I have a Patreon banner, but let me put on my ticker for something else. Let's get maybe the brand YouTube going or something. But if people want to check out my Patreon or make a donation, please feel free to do so. I got my GoFundMe, PayPal, and Patreon links, as well as Subscribestar in the description box. I'm an independent journalist. I'm not controlled by any of the powers that be. So any help would be really appreciated, people. But all I can really ask for is your attention. And I try not to squander your attention by providing substance and style as well. Lori Love spoke about his case and how it relates to Julian's in our online panel, who's this is the WikiLeaks, defend.wikileaks.org. What would Julian Assange face in the United States? Which also included Assange's U.S. Attorney Barry Pollack and CIA whistleblower Jeffrey Sterling, who discussed his imprisonment after being convicted under the Espionage Act. I can link this in the description box, or you guys can go to AssangeDefense.org and go to the live blog for the 22nd of September. Dr. Kopelman testified in Love's case as well. In that case, he said today he was given reassurances that U.S. prisons protect against suicide. Right. But since then, he noted, except when the camera stopped working. Oh, look, we go right under that. Jeffrey Epstein has killed himself in prison, and Chelsea Manning has attempted suicide in the very facility where Assange would be held in pre-trial detention. Those reassurances were not so reassuring, he said. Isolation he would experience in North America would be far worse than anything experienced in Embassy or Belmarsh. But before getting to U.S. prison conditions, the defense is establishing Assange's current mental state and medical evaluations. Dr. Kopelman testified about meeting with Assange on several occasions, finding that he has severe depression and that he has been making end-of-life preparations. Dr. Kopelman reviewed Assange's personal, medical, and family history as factors in his determination, as well as observations he made in these visits. He also noted that renowned autism expert Dr. Simon Baron-Cohen has found that suicide is 9 times more likely in patients who have Asperger's. And Julian Assange recently got diagnosed, as we said, not only with Asperger's, but depression as well. The prosecutor, James Lewis, who we talked about earlier, cross-examined the good doctor, attempting to undermine Dr. Kopelman's expertise on the subject. He suggested that as a neuropsychiatrist, he deals with the interaction between brain disease and mental health, and therefore isn't sufficiently qualified to comment on this case. Insulted, Dr. Kopelman said that he is not just a neuropsychiatrist, and actually Lewis himself has requested Dr. Kopelman's psychiatric services for a different case. So it's a bit rich, quote, for Lewis to question his qualifications. Lewis then suggested that Dr. Kopelman is more of an advocate than a psychiatrist. To which Dr. Kopelman replied that he would like to respond to that with an unparliamentary word. Lewis also tried repeatedly to insinuate that Assange is malingering or exaggerating his symptoms to induce a diagnosis and avoid extradition. Dr. Kopelman said he's well aware of this possibility and knows how and when to look for this sign, which he did not find. Carl Lewis, no, that's not his name. What's his name? Eric Lewis? James Lewis then suggested, Carl Lewis is an athlete, that Dr. Kopelman is more of an advocate than a psychiatrist, and I already said that. He argued that Julian's comments in courts, including his response to whether he agreed to be extradited, no, and his comments from the doc amid witness testimony indicate his ability to follow proceedings and therefore indicate that he doesn't suffer from serious depression. Right, because the ability to answer a question means you're obviously not depressed. Earlier, he tried to establish with Dr. Kopelman that severe depression means an inability to function in work and social activities. Basically, if you have depression, you're like a catatonic robot who has an inability to speak English. That was sarcasm. Dr. Kopelman reiterated that he primarily evaluated Assange from May to December of 2019, as well as a visit this spring, but he doesn't find these comments to preclude a diagnosis of severe depression. If anything, these comments in the middle of court proceedings, he said, appeared to Dr. Kopelman as evidence toward the diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome. So that was the 22nd of September, 2020, hashtag Assange case, hashtag Addy Ads, hashtag Assange update. I'm going to use this picture for the thumbnail, I think. It looks like a BBC photo of Assange. So let's go to the 23rd, day 12, which was yesterday. And we'll see what has been said there. This, on the 23rd, also discussed suicidal ideation. Excuse me, and not all details will be released for Julian's privacy. The prosecution yesterday attacked Assange's autism spectrum diagnosis. And today, Dr. Quentin Deely, by today I mean yesterday afternoon, was on the stand. Let's see what he said to us. There's Julian Assange's father. There's Dr. Quentin Deely, National Health Service psychiatrist who specializes in autism, ADHD, and other mental health issues, took the stand to discuss Julian Assange's diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, an autism spectrum disorder. Dr. Deely interviewed Assange several times over a period of several months, and he spoke to Assange's partner, his mother, and friends to corroborate his findings and prepare a report. Dr. Deely also agreed with what Dr. Kopelman testified to yesterday. that Assange would be a high risk of suicide if he were ordered to be extradited. Dr. Deely explained that Assange had taken 2 ADOS tests. Morning, Nan. Leading to his diagnosis, and he observed obsessive rumination, rigidity of thought, which are typical ASD symptoms, and brief defense questioning. So ASD is autism spectrum disorder. Remember, he got diagnosed with Asperger's by the other man, their doctor. And in brief defense questioning, Dr. Deely also spoke about the high rate of suicides in solitary confinement and the dangers of isolating Julian in both US and UK prisons. The prosecution then spent nearly its entire cross-examination proceedings questioning this diagnosis, attacking Dr. Deely's findings and impartiality. Prosecutor James Lewis suggested that the fact that Assange had hosted a televised interview show, written books and articles, and given speeches indicate his sociability and contradict the diagnosis of Asperger's. So if you have Asperger's, again, you have no ability to talk to other people whatsoever, right? Sarcasm there as well. Prosecutor James Lewis played a video of Assange speaking at the Frontline Club in 2010 via Skype, answering questions about WikiLeaks releases, redacting to protect informants, and partnering with fellow media organizations. Dr. Deely rejected this idea and said that these activities do not contradict a diagnosis at all. On the contrary, they show Assange in his comfort zone, speaking at length on issues of which he has substantial interest and knowledge in a well-defined setting. In these interviews and Q&A sessions, Assange is an expert on the material and knows the expectations of format, so he doesn't have to pay attention to social etiquette or make small talk. That reasoning actually makes very much sense to me, because I do know some people like this, and they actually are more comfortable in front of people making a presentation than in a small group of people, you know, in like a single room, which is, I think, a bit counterintuitive for people to understand. Lewis said the fact that Assange has sole custody of a child was inconsistent with the diagnosis, suggesting that no court would give custody to someone who had difficulty developing peer relationships. He also said that those on the autism spectrum lack empathy, and his mother described him as an extraordinarily selfless father, suggesting these are inconsistent as well. Dr. Deely rejected this idea too, saying that those on the autism spectrum can be parents, and it is not unusual for them to be dutiful and principled, moved by the idea of suffering in general. Dr. Lewis, not Dr. Lewis, Prosecutor Lewis, questioned Dr. Deely's impartiality once again, asking if he was trying to excuse behavior or confirm a diagnosis. Dr. Deely said he was giving a comprehensive summary and that trying to drill down on one item of supportive evidence for the diagnosis misses the full picture. Prosecutor Lewis said that Dr. Deely himself often looked at the ceiling when giving answers in court rather than making eye contact, insinuating that eye contact is not relevant to a diagnosis, and even saying, quote, "We all do that." Dr. Deely seemed taken aback, saying he didn't think he would score highly on an ADOS test, meaning he would not be found on the autism spectrum, that he was presenting to the defense, the judge, and the prosecution. Eye contact alone is not a definitive indicator and therefore not the only variable. On final defense re-examination, Dr. Deely confirmed his corroboration of the diagnosis. It is clear to my mind that Julian Assange is on the autism spectrum. Prosecution brought their first witness yesterday. For the day was Sina Fazel. Sina Fazel. Sina Fazel. As scheduling issues disrupted the defense witness list, the defense witnesses will continue to testify today. In fact, they're probably doing so right now. If not, they have already done so. What time is it? I don't even know what time it is. 11:15. Yeah, so they've already done so. Okay. So Sina Fazel is a professor of forensic psychiatry at the University of Oxford who specializes in prison suicide. Fazel interviewed Assange this summer, notably after what doctors agree what was his most severe period of depression at the end of 2019. Fazel testified that he did indeed found Julian to be moderately depressed, but accepts that he was severely depressed in late 2019, was treated with medication, and that Assange's depression intensity is episodic, liable to fluctuate dependent on his circumstances. However, he doesn't find Julian Assange's mental capacity such that he is unable to manage his own suicidal risk. Fazel agreed that Julian has autistic-like traits, but that he would be in the milder end of the autism spectrum. In defense cross-examination, Fazel conceded that he is not an expert in U.S. prisons, which have 6 to 7 times larger inmate population. This means, the defense established, that he's not aware of Alexandria Detention Center, where Assange would be held in pretrial confinement, nor the full effect of special administrative measures. Remember, we talked about those before. SAMs, special administrative measures. Shout out to Shrimp for putting on the lights. To which Assange would be subjected. Remember, they're called SAMs for short, SAMS. Nor he's aware of ADX Florence, the infamous ADX Florence in Colorado, where El Chapo is, where Assange is likely to be sent post-trial if convicted. ADX Florence is a supermax prison in Colorado in the United States. It also houses Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, Uncle Ted. And where conditions under SAMS have been described by a former warden there as a clean version of hell. Former warden ADX Florence said this. And, quote, unfit for human habitation. This is the warden saying this. The former warden. U.S. prison experts will be called to testify about those facilities likely later this week. Discussing solitary confinement and lengthy prison sentences, Fazel said that hopelessness is an important risk factor for suicide, and Assange's risk increases if he feels he has bleak prospects. Prosecution questioning attempted to undermine the definition of solitary confinement and to paint a rosier view of supermax imprisonment. It's quite rosy in supermax. That's what I've heard. As prosecutor James Lewis read off a long list of amenities allegedly offered at the federal facility in Colorado, such as, quote, 13-inch television. I can't do this. And, quote, arts and crafts. That's where I want to send my future art student, ADX Florence. The defense noted that this description does not apply to Housing Unit H, where Assange would be held. So no arts and crafts classes in Housing Unit H. That's what we learned today. This has been the update for today on the Julian Assange trial, September 22nd and 23rd. So it actually, I didn't go over the update of what is going on or what has happened today. Again, those updates usually come in a couple hours once his defense and the media has time to organize their notes and decide what information they want to release. Then it shows up on AssangeDefense.org, where it's just the place that I found to be the most up-to-date info. And I'm just trying to break it down, dissect it, curate it for you guys. So I'll do probably another update later today. Once that update comes out, let me just double check to make sure it hasn't come out already. It usually doesn't come out that soon, but yeah, nothing today yet for the hearing update. So these are the most recent hearing updates. They've been talking about Julian Assange's mental health and his psychological status. They have listed him as a someone who has Asperger's and who is on the autism spectrum. He is suffering clinical depression right now. He had major depression, severe depression towards the end of 2019, and he's still suffering from depression, depending on his circumstances. So he's adapting. He said one of the most positive and negative things about humans is our ability to adapt, and I think that's very true. It's quite unfortunate his children are fatherless, not of their own accord or fault, nor even on the accord of Assange either. It really was not his decision to be locked up like he has been for the last almost a decade now. So here's the update, guys. I might do it later, one later today if they release today's hearing, which has already passed. It's the end of the workday over there in London, England, over at the Old Bailey. This is Addy Ads, Anakin Skywalker, YouTube's chosen one. Please give me a subscription, a like. PayPal, GoFundMe, Patreon are all in the description box below. And if you are so willing, please give me a sub on Brand New Tube as well, where they are very supportive of my work over there. None of my videos have been removed or censored from Brand New Tube. Brand New Tube is based in the United Kingdom. They are a pro-First Amendment, pro-free speech platform. Sometimes there is a few technical difficulties over there, but it's getting better all the time. They just added super chats to people who are live streaming. And I'm actually growing much faster on my Brand New Tube in the subscriber medium of statistical measurement than I am over here. So go ahead and do that. All my George Webb interviews, my John Wedger interview that got removed, and a couple other videos that I have posted on YouTube that have gotten removed are all on Brand New Tube on my channel if people want to check them out. Stay frosty, and we will see you all soon.